A body has been discovered by tourists in Russia's Ural Mountains at the famous Dyatlov Pass. The pass was the setting for a real-life Soviet mystery. The bodies of 9 hikers were found almost 60 years ago. The cause of their deaths still unknown. Now police and emergency teams have set out on an expedition to get to the pass to investigate the latest find.
The Dyatlov Pass Incident is one of the most bizarre, if not one of the most terrifying events that have occurred in the last 60 years. This case is so perplexing that it has baffled experts for over half a century. Most excursions into nature are serene and act as a chance to escape the realities of day-to-day life for a while, but for an unfortunate few this is not the case. Some journeys end with such unfathomable and frightening circumstances that they become legend, as is found here where 9 skiing enthusiasts met their end in the late 1950s. What makes this case so fascinating is that unlike some mysteries, there is little doubt that this event actually occurred, and further still, whatever happened here was nothing short of disturbing. Much of the evidence exists in photos taken by investigators, but also in the extensive records of the Soviet military, who took a lead role in the investigation. Interesting to note is the fact that many of these records are still classified by the military today. Bizarrely, despite an overwhelming amount of physical evidence left behind, investigators were eventually forced to attribute the event to be as a result of, and I quote, a compelling unknown force. On January the 25th, 1959, one ski instructor, along with 3 engineers and 7 students from the former Soviet Union's Ural Polytechnic Institute embarked on their journey to the Autartan mountain range. The leader of the trip was 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, whom the pass would eventually be named in memory of. Igor had managed to put together a very experienced team of male and female skiers with the intention of using this trip as a training exercise before embarking on future expeditions into more difficult Arctic regions. Before the group were able to board the train, it became apparent that one of their members, known as Yuri Yudin, fell ill and was unable to continue on with the group. Yuri and the team said their goodbyes, and it was unimaginable at the time that Yuri would be the lucky one. As time went by, and in later years, Yuri had said that this incident haunted him throughout his life, and that he was not able to discover what kind of diabolical force took the lives of his friends. A fate that Yuri himself knew would have taken him too had it not been for his unexpected and sudden illness. Yuri was quoted as saying, "If I had a chance to ask God just one question, it would be, what really happened to my friends that night?" 2 days after embarking on their journey, Igor would lead the rest of the group to their first stop, known as the Gora Autartan mountain. The current date was January the 28th, 1959. The group of skiers would never make it to their destination, and none of them would ever be seen alive again. Cameras and diaries were discovered at the site of their deaths, and investigators were able to conclude that on February the 1st, the hiking team began to make their way through Dyatlov Pass, which was unnamed at the time, leading to Autartan. Unfortunately, as they pushed forwards, they encountered heavy snowstorms which caused the group to lose their sense of direction, and instead of moving towards Autartan, they deviated west and found themselves on the slope of a nearby mountain. This mountain was called the Kolat Cycle, or rather, Mountain of the Dead. There, despite coming to the realization that they were not at the correct place, Igor made the decision to camp there to avoid backtracking and losing the altitude that they had gained. It was at this location that something highly unusual occurred to the group of 9. It's important to note that before the group started their journey, Igor told his sports club that the team would send a telegram as soon as they had completed the hike. However, no telegram ever came. Initially, the team's family members were not concerned with the lack of communication, and they went under the assumption that journeys like these rarely end on schedule. However, after another week had passed, and on February the 20th, 1959, the entire group were reported as missing, and this would commence a massive search effort. The Ural Polytechnic Institute first began the search, and within days they came to the realization that this task was bigger than them and called in the military and civilian authorities to help with the search. Military aircraft were dispatched immediately, and on February the 25th, a pilot spotted a seemingly abandoned campsite on top of the Mountain of the Dead. The following day, on January the 26th, a search party arrived at the scene on foot, including a fellow Polytechnic student named Mikhail Sharovin. What they found there was nothing short of disturbing and left the rescuers feeling hopeless for the group. On this peak, the rescuers found a badly damaged tent along with the footprints of the group heading out in different directions into the surrounding forests. This is what Mikhail had to say. "We discovered that the tent was half torn down and covered with snow. It was empty and all of the group's belongings and shoes had been left behind." Now if things weren't already strange enough, let's get really bizarre. Upon discovering the shoes and taking another glance at the footprints, the rescuers obviously quickly came to the realization that these tracks indicated people running either barefoot or in socks, and in one case, a single shoe. It's unclear exactly what took place here, but whatever happened must have terrified all 9 members of the group. Mikhail and the other rescuers followed some of the tracks 1,500 feet away from the tent and found the remains of a fire beneath an ancient pine tree. Surrounding the fire were the frozen remains of 2 members of the group. If things weren't already strange enough, upon closer inspection of this location, things got much stranger. The searchers detailed that despite the men being within range of the now destroyed tent, they were both wearing nothing but underwear. And, when inspecting the tree, noticed that branches had been snapped up to a height of around 15 feet, meaning that these men must have tried to climb the tree in desperation. Further evidence of this was found as forensic tests would later confirm that traces of skin were found embedded in the bark, indicating a frantic attempt at a climb. Further still, it was noted that the men's hands had been reduced to nothing more than a mass of pulpy flesh. These facts alone are nothing short of bizarre, and the rescuers were left baffled as they suspected that something must have terrified these men but had absolutely no idea what could have caused such a panic. It was specifically mentioned that the searchers said that they had no idea what manner of beast could have scared these men so much that they left their belongings behind and severely damaged themselves in an attempt to get away. Bizarrely, the searchers said that there were no other tracks in the snow apart from the groups, effectively ruling out animal predation. This line of thought was furthered as the men had the time to start a fire at the location before attempting to climb the tree, suggesting that whatever happened here may have come back. In any case, these facts only heightened the searchers' confusion. Soon afterwards, Igor himself was found around 900 feet away from the tree and somewhat closer to the tent. The discovery of his body was just as confusing as the previous 2. Igor was found on his back with one hand clinging onto an undersized birch tree branch, while the other seemed to be trying to protect his head. The question remains, if the discovery of Igor was as seemed, i.e. he was trying to fight something off, what on earth was he fighting off that didn't leave any footprints? The searchers detailed that every finding here seemed to tell a very disturbing story that just didn't make any sense at all. Again, not far away from the tent and half buried in the snow, another body was found which unsurprisingly at this point had its own bizarre puzzle. The body belonged to a man named Rustam who was found face down in the snow. The skull was found to contain a deep fracture of around 7 inches long, and bizarrely, medical experts ruled that he must have died as a result of hypothermia, which only added to the confusion. Shortly afterwards, searchers found the body of Zenaida, who was the furthest away from the group, and traces of blood surrounded her body, though searchers detailed that they could not come up with an explanation for this as there was no evidence of a struggle. Unfortunately, at this point, the searchers could not locate the rest of the team despite a lengthy search effort due to weather conditions in the area and the buildup of snow. The searchers noted that they could not come up with a reasonable explanation as to why a group of experienced skiers would run almost naked into the forests in the black of night. The searchers did agree on one thing, however, that is, something seemed to have terrified the group. Now, let's get even more bizarre. After further investigation, the searchers came to a terrifying conclusion when examining the tent. The searchers detailed that the material had been torn from the inside, almost as if the group were desperately trying to escape from something that was either already sealed inside the tent with them, or were in such a hurry to get out that unclasping the tent was not an option. 2 months had passed at this point, and all attempts made at finding the remaining members of the group had failed. However, once spring set in, the bodies of the lost members of the group were finally found as the weather in the area began to let up. The last 4 bodies were found in a ravine around 225 feet away from the ancient pine tree and were discovered buried beneath 12 feet of snow and ice. In another bizarre turn, these deaths were even more complicated for the coroner to determine. All 4 of the remaining group members had succumbed to brutal internal injuries and, unlike their friends, were all fully clothed. In addition to this, 2 of these individuals showed evidence of having been struck by something very heavy as their skulls were severely damaged. On the other hand, the remaining 2 skiers' chests had been crushed inwards, which also shattered several ribs and obviously caused massive internal damage. These findings were absolutely bizarre, as they were coupled with the fact that there was no indication at all as to what could have possibly caused this trauma, alongside the fact that all 4 of them showed no signs of bruising or soft tissue damage. All of the bodies were inspected by a doctor named Boris Vozrodeny, who stated that they were hit with such a force that exceeded the capability of man, and was quoted as saying that the damage was equal to the effect of a car crash. It was also noted that the body belonging to Dubinina may have provided further clues, as her head was tilted back and her mouth was stretched wide as if she may have been screaming when she passed. It was also noted that she was missing her tongue and that it had been ripped out by the root. After these findings and all of the medical examinations had taken place, funerals followed, and family members made some very strange observations. They detailed that the skin tone of the victims were an unnatural orange colour, and many reports suggested that the victims had experienced a little hair loss, and much of the remaining hair had lost its pigmentation, causing it to appear as a dark grey. On top of all that was the finding that some articles of clothing that were found on the bodies measured as emitting higher than normal levels of radiation. Just a truly bizarre finding that was not easy to explain away. This incident sent Soviet investigators into overdrive, with everyone involved wanting to be a part of providing an answer to this event. First, they tried to reconstruct the events that led to the group's demise with the help of the recovered journals and film rolls discovered at the scene. Thanks to Yuri, they were able to come up with a couple of possibilities as to why Igor decided to camp on the wrong mountain. Yuri said, and I quote, "Dyatlov probably did not want to lose the distance they had covered, or he had decided to practice camping on the mountain slope." Afterwards, investigators had the group's photos developed and noted that the group looked very healthy and in good spirits on the day they set up camp on the mountain. Investigators came to the conclusion that around 7 PM on the night of camping, the group ate a meal together and not long afterwards settled down for the night. Temperatures at the time were around 5 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 15 degrees Celsius, and researchers determined that everything at this point was normal. Forensic pathologists estimated that something went horribly wrong during the hours between 9:30 PM and 11:30 PM that night, as the entire group had passed away sometime between those hours. It's interesting to note that the Soviet military took a great interest in this case and made an attempt to piece together the timeline. Based on all evidence acquired, military investigators speculated that before midnight on the night they set up camp, the group were frightened by, and I quote, "an unknown event." Thereafter, members of the team cut through the inside of the tent in a desperate attempt to get out and away from whatever was either attacking or approaching them, and in their state of panic, they left mostly unclothed. This case is absolutely bizarre on numerous accounts. The members of this team were not inexperienced. In fact, they were very experienced skiers and mountaineers. All members of this group were fully aware that they would not survive for very long in this climate without protection from the elements. So, they knew leaving like this was life-threatening. Thus, they must have been absolutely convinced that their lives were in danger and had opted to flee. At this point, evidence found in the form of footprints suggests that the team scrambled out of panic and fled away in all directions, before managing to rejoin one another down the incline around 900 feet away from the tent. Military investigators then said that the group must have huddled for safety beneath the ancient pine tree the 2 men had so desperately tried and failed to climb. Under this tree, investigators speculated that the group made an attempt to share clothes and were too fearful to return to the tent. It's unclear whether the group gathered under the tree before or after the death of the two men, but whatever the case may be, investigators stated that they weren't sure if the efforts to climb the tree were a futile attempt to escape or an attempt to get a vantage point to see the tent. But based on the condition of the hands, evidence suggests it was an attempt to get away from a source of danger. It was theorized that these men died of hypothermia thereafter. Afterwards, 3 members of the group thought that it would be best to get back to the tent and either face or hope that whatever scared them so badly was gone, rather than also succumb to hypothermia themselves. None of them would make it back, however, and would pass away due to exposure on the way back. Now, onto the 4 members found in the ravine 225 feet away from the tent. Military researchers speculated that at this point, the remaining 4 were most likely terrified beyond belief and had decided to strip clothes from the corpses in order to survive. Fearing for their safety and concluding that the rest of their group were all dead, they must have moved downhill near the forest to find shelter. The researchers went on. Somewhere along this journey and descent into the ravine, the remaining 4 sustained their fatal internal injuries but could not determine a cause and were admittedly left confused. It's thought that the final member of the group passed away around 8 hours after the initial event. And of course, everything mentioned so far only offered more questions than it did answers. While the military tried to come up with an explanation, there are still many questions that remain without an answer. For example, there is little doubt that the team were terrified, so what were they terrified of? And why were they willing to freeze to death rather than confront it? And secondly, what caused the severe internal injuries of those found in the ravine without damaging the soft tissue or causing bruising? It's obvious to all that the military, along with the authorities, took this incident seriously, as the region was closed for 3 years following this event, despite its popularity. After months of failed attempts at concluding this case, it was eventually closed and some files archived and classified by the Soviet military. The official final word on this event highlights the complexity and unusualness of the case by stating, and I quote, "The skiers fell to a compelling, unknown force, which opened the door to many theories and speculation." The first theory offered was that the group of 9 must have unintentionally travelled upon some of the aggressive Mansi tribesmen who had dispatched them. Perhaps the tribesmen were enraged that people had ventured into their territory and wanted revenge. However, military investigators were quick to confirm that this could not have been the case, as the damage done to the bodies were inconsistent to that of an attack by another human being. Not to mention the fact that no one had been shot by a gun or an arrow, and there were no other footprints than the group of 9, effectively ruling out some sort of ambush. Interestingly, according to legend, the Mountain of the Dead, where the group set up camp, received its name after 9 Mansi warriors had passed away on the same peak years before, leading the tribe to believe the region was cursed. At the time of this incident, another group of hikers, who were 32 miles south of the mountain, said that they saw a series of strange orange spheres in the northern sky. It's worth mentioning that over the course of the next month, other residents of the area also reported seeing strange phenomena in the skies. The lead investigator, Lev Ivanov, believed that these anomalous objects spotted in the sky may have been involved with the deaths. In 1990, Lev stated that he had been ordered to close the case and classify the findings as a secret. Bizarrely, both military and weather services alike reported seeing unusual objects and lights in the sky at the time. Lev said, and I quote, "I suspected at the time, and I'm almost sure now, that these bright flying spheres had a direct connection to the group's death. It was also suggested that the orange skin, grey hair and radiated clothing may also point to something highly unusual taking place on that mountain. But of course, this theory, along with the others, remain in the realm of speculation." Yuri, who was lucky enough to have fallen ill before departure, firmly believed that the deaths were as a result of a military experiment gone wrong. Yuri said that he believed that the group inadvertently entered a covert military testing ground and had paid for it with their lives. He speculated that this was why the military had been so secretive throughout their entire investigation, and also explained the irradiated clothing. Yuri was also asked to help identify the group's objects found at the site, and he said that in the mix of possessions was a torn piece of fabric that he identified as belonging to a soldier's coat, as well as a pair of glasses and skis that did not belong to the group. Bizarrely, Yuri also testified to seeing documents that stated investigations into the site had begun 2 weeks before the reported official discovery. Yuri also said that he knew for a fact that, and I quote, there were special boxes with their organs sent for examination, but this was obviously not in any official documentation. Again though, it's important to note that this still remains in the realm of speculation. Many other theories were also offered, including a sudden avalanche, but no theory put forward has managed to explain all aspects of this incident. In early February 2019, Russian authorities announced that they were reopening the case, and the Russian Prosecutor General's office vowed to put all the theories about their deaths to rest. A spokesperson said all of the deaths are somehow connected with natural phenomena. However, the Russian people remained unconvinced, the spokesperson said, and I quote, relatives, the media, and the public still ask prosecutors to determine the truth and don't hide their suspicions that something was hidden from them. Investigators are expected to return to the location at the beginning of next month and will carry out 9 separate examinations, but will only be considering 3 theories out of the 75 proposed theories. The theories to be covered are a hurricane, a snow slab, or an avalanche. Of course, many people have criticised this, stating that none of these explain the irradiated clothing or why the group cut the tent to get out, and have expressed that they don't have much faith in the investigation. What do you think about this famous incident? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts and opinions, so let me know in the comments. I'd just like to take a moment to thank all of you that have subscribed to the channel and who share these videos, like them, and just generally show support. I appreciate it a lot and can't thank you enough. Also, I'd just like to say thank you to my patrons for supporting me over at Patreon, so thank you very much for all of your support and generosity. It is very appreciated and has allowed me to use the footage you see on the channel, so thank you to all who have signed up. Anyway, do let me know what you thought of this one, and you'll find all of the sources and links in the description below. As always, thank you very much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, remember to like and subscribe if you haven't already, it helps me a lot. I hope that you have a great day, or evening depending on where you are. Be safe guys, and I'll catch you soon. Peace.